What's up, fam? Welcome back. Today, we're diving into one of the most frustrating and hilarious aspects of the MCU, the timeline mistakes that make absolutely no sense and everyone notices. Look, we love the MCU. It's why we are here watching YouTube videos talking about it. It's given us over a decade of incredible storytelling and cinematic moments. But let's be real, when you're juggling 30 plus movies and countless TV shows all happening in the same universe, things are going to get a little messy. From Spider-Man's impossible school schedule to Captain America's notebook that changes depending on what country you're in, we're breaking down every major timeline mistake, continuity error, and head-scratching moment that will make you question if Marvel Studios even has a timeline guy. And I know we still probably missed some, but that's what you're here for. Let me have it in the comments what you're seeing and what I'm not. So buckle up, because this is going to hurt your brain. But first, smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Trust me, you'll want to be here for this chaos. Let's jump in. Let's start with the big one, the granddaddy of MCU timeline errors, Spider-Man Homecoming's 8 years later card. At the beginning of Homecoming, we see a flashback to Adrian Toomes and his crew cleaning up after the Battle of New York from the first Avengers movie. The movie then flashes forward with a title card that says 8 years later, placing Homecoming in 2020. Here's the problem. The Avengers came out in 2012 and takes place in 2012. 8 years later would be 2020. But we know Homecoming takes place in 2016, just a few months after Civil War, which happened in 2016. The movie literally references the Sokovia Accords and the Germany airport thing, like it just happened. So either the title card is wrong, or the entire MCU timeline is off by 4 years. Marvel has since admitted this was a mistake, and they've tried to retcon it in various ways, but the damage is done. This one error threw off fan timelines for years and caused massive confusion about when everything actually takes place. The craziest part, this mistake made it through multiple drafts, production, post-production, and nobody caught it until fans started doing the math after the movie came out. Speaking of time jumps, let's talk about the 5-year time jump in Endgame and how it absolutely wrecked the MCU timeline going forward. Infinity War takes place in 2018. Thanos snaps. Endgame jumps forward 5 years to 2023. The Avengers bring everyone back. Cool, we're all caught up, right? Wrong. Here's where it gets messy. Spider-Man Far From Home takes place 8 months after Endgame, putting it in late 2024. But Peter Parker is still in high school, and so is everyone who got snapped. Ned, MJ, Flash. They all came back the same age and went right back to school. But what about all the kids who didn't get snapped? They're now 5 years older. Peter's entire class should have graduated. There should be kids in his class who were in middle school when he left. The school dynamics should be completely different. Far From Home barely addresses this. They call it the blip and make a joke about it in a school news broadcast, but they don't actually deal with the implications. Like, did half the teachers get snapped too? How does the school even function? Is Peter technically held back 5 years? And this affects every piece of MCU content going forward. This one's more of a fun continuity error than a timeline mistake, but it's too good not to mention. In The Winter Soldier, Steve Rogers has a notebook where he's writing down things he needs to catch up on from the 70 years he missed. It's a great character moment. The problem? The notebook changes depending on what country the movie is released in. In the US version, Steve's list includes things like I Love Lucy, Moon Landing, Berlin Wall, and Steve Jobs. Makes sense, right? These are culturally significant American moments, but in the UK version, the list is completely different. It includes the Beatles, Sean Connery, and the World Cup final 1966. In the Australian version, AC/DC and Steve Irwin are on there. In the Russian version, Yuri Gagarin makes the list. Now, this isn't technically a timeline error, it's a localization choice, but it creates a weird situation where Steve's notebook exists in multiple states depending on where you're watching. In the multiverse, maybe? Or is there a version of Steve in each country writing different lists? It's hilarious and charming, but it's also a continuity nightmare if you think about it too hard. Which version is canon? All of them? None of them? Are we supposed to pretend Steve somehow has different cultural knowledge depending on your location? Let's go back to Spider-Man for a second because his age is all over the place. In Civil War, Tony Stark recruits Peter Parker, who's 15 years old and a sophomore in high school. This takes place in 2016. This makes sense so far. Homecoming takes place a few months later, still in 2016. Peter's still 15, still a sophomore. Perfect. Infinity War happens in 2018. Peter should be 17 now, probably a senior, but the movie never really addresses his age or what grade he's in. He gets snapped, along with half of all life. Endgame brings everyone back in 2023. Peter is still biologically 17 because he was snapped for 5 years. He goes back to school in Far From Home, which takes place 8 months after Endgame in 2024. But here's the weird part. Far From Home treats Peter and his friends like they're still juniors going into senior year. They talk about college applications and senior year trip. If Peter was a senior when he got snapped in 2018, he should be, what exactly? Starting senior year over? Taking a gap 5 years? The movie never really explains it. And No Way Home continues this confusion by having Peter apply to colleges like he's a normal senior, even though his entire life has been thrown off by 5 years. The MCU basically decided to hand-wave Peter's age and school situation, which, fine, but it doesn't make any logical sense when you actually think about the timeline. WandaVision gave us one of the coolest concepts in the MCU, Wanda creating an entire sitcom reality to cope with her grief, but it also gave us a timeline headache. The show takes place 3 weeks after Endgame, which means it's happening in November 2023. The problem, when we see the Halloween episode set in the 2000s sitcom style, the calendar in Wanda's house shows October 2023. But then in other episodes, we see documents and files from SWORD that show different dates. Some files suggest it's been months since Endgame, not weeks. And when we see Monica Rambeau come back from the blip, the hospital scene suggests it's happening right when everyone returns, which would be October 2023. So is WandaVision happening in October or November? Is it 3 weeks after Endgame or right when everyone comes back? The show gives us conflicting information, and Marvel hasn't officially clarified the exact timeline. It's a small thing, but it matters when you're trying to piece together the larger MCU timeline, especially since WandaVision directly leads into Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Let's talk about the movie that Marvel really wishes we'd all forget about, The Incredible Hulk. This movie supposedly takes place in 2011 after Iron Man, but before the Avengers. But here's the thing, nothing in the movie actually confirms this. There are no references to other MCU events, no clear timeline markers, and the only connection to the larger universe is Tony Stark showing up for like 30 seconds in a post-credit scene. But it gets weirder. General Ross, who's a major character in The Incredible Hulk, doesn't show up again until Civil War in 2016. That's a 5-year gap where he apparently did nothing, and then suddenly he's Secretary of State pushing the Sokovia Accords. How did that happen? Also, in The Incredible Hulk, Banner is on the run and trying to cure himself. But in the Avengers, he's already in control of the Hulk and living peacefully in India. What happened between these movies? How did he gain control? We never see it, and nobody ever explains it. How is it that the Hulk goes from crazy and incredibly dangerous to, hey, it's Hulk, thanks for helping, buddy? The Incredible Hulk exists in this weird space where it's technically MCU canon, but it's so disconnected from everything else that Marvel barely acknowledges it. Even the actor changed from Edward Norton to Mark Ruffalo, making it feel even more separate. Guardians of the Galaxy takes place in 2014, the same year Peter Quill was abducted from Earth as a kid in 1988. Wait, that doesn't add up. Peter says in the movie that he was abducted 26 years ago. 1988 plus 26 years equals 2014. Perfect math, right? Except Peter was abducted in 1988 when he was around 8 to 10 years old. So in 2014, he should be 34 to 36 years old. Chris Pratt was 35 when Guardians came out, so that actually works. But here's where it gets confusing. The movie treats 2014 like it's the present day, but it's happening at the same time as the Winter Soldier on Earth, which is also set in 2014. And this means while Steve Rogers is fighting Hydra and dealing with the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D., Peter Quill is halfway across the galaxy fighting Ronan. These events are happening simultaneously, but they feel completely disconnected. And when you get to Endgame, the Avengers travel back to 2014 to get the Power Stone, which is when Guardians of the Galaxy is happening. Past Gamora and past Thanos get pulled into 2023, which creates this whole alternate timeline thing. It's not technically a mistake, but it's confusing as hell when you're trying to figure out the chronology of the MCU, especially since Guardians feels so removed from Earth-based events. Thor's timeline is a nightmare, and it's mostly because Asgardians apparently age differently than humans, but the movies never really explain the rules. Thor is supposedly over 1,500 years old. He mentions in Infinity War that he's 1,500 years old, give or take. But in the first Thor movie, which takes place in 2011, he's been alive for 1,500 years and acts like he's in his late 20s or early 30s. Here's the problem. Odin says in the first Thor movie that Asgardians live for around 5,000 years. So Thor at 1,500 should be basically a young adult. But he acts way more mature and experienced than that. He's led armies, fought wars, and been Odin's son and heir for centuries. Also, the timeline of Asgardian history doesn't make sense. Hela, Thor's older sister, was locked away thousands of years ago, but Thor is only 1,500 years old. So Hela was imprisoned before Thor was even born, but Odin and Frigga are Thor's parents, and they're also Hela's parents. Did Odin and Frigga wait thousands of years between kids? Did they just decide to have Thor and Loki super late in life? And why does nobody in Asgard remember Hela if she was only imprisoned like 2,000 to 3,000 years ago? Asgardians live for 5,000 years, so there should be people who remember her. The timeline just doesn't add up, and Marvel never bothered to clarify it. So there you have it. The complete guide to MCU timeline mistakes that will make your brain hurt. From Spider-Man's impossible 8 years later to Thor's confusing Asgardian, the MCU timeline is held together with duct tape and hope. Look, do these mistakes ruin the movies? Of course not. The MCU is still incredible, and most of these errors are pretty minor in the grand scheme of things, but they're fun to talk about, and they show that even the biggest cinematic universe in history isn't perfect. And the real question is, will Marvel ever officially fix these timeline issues, or are we just going to keep pretending that math doesn't matter in the MCU? My guess is the latter. Drop a comment and let me know which timeline mistake bothers you the most, or if there's one I missed that drives you crazy. And hey, if you work at Marvel and you're watching this, maybe hire a continuity person. Just a thought. If you enjoyed this video, smash that subscribe button, because we've got plenty more MCU deep dives coming your way. Until next time, this is Multiverse of Mayhem, reminding you that time is a flat circle, especially in the MCU. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.